Well, so much for retirement for Antonio Brown, and we knew at the time that he basically gave in to the frustration a couple of weeks ago because the NFL had yet to let him know what his status was, that it really wasn't a permanent retirement. He would continue to wait for word from the NFL as to what his status is. The word came Friday afternoon, 8-game suspension for Antonio Brown for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. That's the headline. The text, though, of the story is more important than the headline because it doesn't end all NFL business as it relates to Antonio Brown's potential violations of the personal conduct policy. He had 3 things that the NFL was investigating. This 8-game suspension applies to 2 of them. What is still left is the thing that got this all started, Chris, September of last year, the lawsuit filed against Antonio Brown for sexual assault and rape. That hasn't been resolved yet. The NFL, I'm told, has conducted an investigation. The NFL has not yet been able to come to a conclusion. The NFL will potentially take action based upon further evidence. And I think what the NFL is doing here is protecting itself against a verdict in the civil case that Antonio Brown did what he's accused of doing.
Right.
And if the NFL has previously exonerated him, then they look foolish because they get superseded by a verdict that says, hey, NFL, you got it wrong. You made an excuse for a guy that a civil court in Florida decided did commit sexual assault and rape. So I think that is their out.
Yeah.
That is their, we reserve the right to change our minds later.
Which I get it. Do you not get that or what? I mean,
I don't. I get it, but I don't like it.
Right.
Because you put an apparatus in place to make these decisions, NFL. You make a decision, regardless of what happens in court. You know, they suspended Ezekiel Elliott 6 games, and there was no criminal proceeding, and there was never even a civil proceeding.
Right.
There was no lawsuit filed against him. Sometimes and if you're going to set up this in-house justice system, you can't just punt and say, well, we don't really know, and we know that there's another mechanism out there that may make us look bad because they may disagree with us, so we better not do anything. No, make a decision. And if the evidence is inconclusive, then close the case. We've talked to the alleged victim. We've talked to him. We've pursued other evidence, and we are at a point where we cannot conclude that he violated the policy. Well, good, then he didn't violate the policy. And end this.
But
these things have to come to an end at some point. You just can't sit back and say, we'll revisit this if and when this civil lawsuit gets resolved with a verdict against Antonio Brown. I don't like that. It's one of the many things I don't like about the personal conduct policy.
Yeah.
They need to do the investigation, make a decision, and move on. If you're going to have a justice system, you got to dispense justice. Justice delayed, as they say in the legal system, is justice denied.
Well, what's taking the civil case so long? Do we really know that?
They always take
forever.
It was filed in September. They always take forever.
Well, listen.
They always do.
You know, like, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, you're right. It's not right that he has to sit there and wait all this time and do all that. But I also think with a guy like Antonio Brown, with some of the issues he's had to deal with, that they got to take their time and be careful here. Because, like, to what you're saying, all right, like, well, let's just say he goes to civil, or let's say the NFL suspends him 2 extra games, right, for this thing. Because we don't know. We didn't, find enough evidence of wrongdoing. But, yeah, you put yourself in a bad situation and conduct detrimental to the shield, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to suspend you 2 games. Okay, but then you have like the civil lawsuit, and maybe something comes out that we didn't know about, or more evidence of it.
NFL should have found out about it. But that's the thing. If you're going to put a system in place to investigate, you got to find this stuff.
You're right.
out.
Then they need to take the system out because it's stupid.
Exactly.
Because they're burning themselves. Ultimately, they've put themselves in a very tough spot. So yes, with you there, I agree. Like get done with it. Be over with it, because you're right. Right now they placed a system to where guy's life is on hold. Certainly. Now, has he acted appropriately? Do I feel horrible for a guy that his life's been put on hold? Not necessarily. I mean, he's had a few strikes here. We know that. And I think that's got to lead them to being a little bit more careful than usual as well. So I don't know. Ultimately, what do you think this does to Antonio Brown? Like, I still don't think any team's going to sign him until we hear about this last piece of the puzzle, right? I mean, I don't think anything.
No.
You think
I
so?
think the message is. I think that when I look at what they said and I factor in what I know, I think the message is it's unlikely that anything more is going to come out of this incident, this civil suit in Florida, especially if he does what he should have done before it was ever filed, which is settle the thing. You can settle the thing with an agreement that the alleged victim will not cooperate with anyone unless she's subject to a subpoena. She won't talk about it. She won't say anything. The cases get settled with those terms in them all the time, and she's already talked to the NFL. She's not going to say anything more to the NFL, and if they don't have enough evidence based upon what she's already said, they don't have enough evidence to do anything. But see, the problem is this entire thing is born of a misguided PR concern that the NFL has to police guys' lives away from work in the months that the season isn't even happening. And the more they chase that PR angle, the more you get unfair results. And the fact that, and you touched on this, Antonio Brown's an unsympathetic figure. So it's harder to muster the will to stand up and pound on the table for fairness and justice for Antonio Brown, because you're like, well, he kind of gets what he deserves. I mean, you've got that nagging sense that this is all in a weird sort of way justified, but at the same time, this exposes the flaws, the very deep and profound flaws in the personal conduct policy. He's already served, Chris, a 14-game unpaid suspension because teams last year believed that if they signed him with this sexual assault and rape lawsuit pending and the investigation from the NFL not resolved, he'd be put on the commissioner exempt list and they'd be paying him not to play. Well, now the end result of what happened Friday is, hey, once he serves his 8-week suspension or 8-game suspension, it's 8 weeks if he's not on a team, it's 8 games if he is on a team, he's good to go. That's the message. They don't have to worry. I think the last thing that's going to happen is he's going to serve his 8-game suspension, and then somebody signs him, and the NFL is going to say, sorry, he's on the commissioner exempt list until we figure out this other thing that's still pending. That game is over. He's going to serve 8 games, and he's going to be ready to go. The question is, who's going to give him a job either before then or after the 8th week of the season?
Well, there's going to be some teams that are going to be interested, certainly. But, that is going to have to get figured out. And I guess where I go here, Mike, is like, so what is the NFL? What's the next step, though? The NFL just got to, wait for these cases to get resolved in court at some point if they don't want to
one case. Yeah. One case. That's it.
One case.
The case that was filed last September alleging that he sexually assaulted and raped a former trainer, the thing that first put this mess on his docket and put him in a position where he was the subject of investigation, that's still there. And I think that when you read between the lines, and I assume that teams will be talking to the league office. See, when teams talk to the league office during the season, the message they got was, I believe, I don't know this, but I think circumstances bear this out. The message they got was, if you sign him, we're probably going to put him on the commissioner exempt list. I think the message now is the 8 games pays his debt to the NFL, and this other thing is just kind of going to fizzle out unless there's a verdict against him, unless there's some dramatic courtroom testimony that creates a PR urgency to take further action. Again, it's not driven by any sense of justice. It's driven by protecting the shield.
Yes.
And that's what makes it wholly unsuited in the first place. And they should tear it down, burn it down, roll it up into a ball and throw it away, because there is nothing about it that speaks of fairness and justice for the players. It's when you try to get into the business of investigating it and doing it yourself. It's one thing to say, player pleaded guilty to a felony, we're going to impose punishment. And that's one of the reasons why he suspended 8 games. He pleaded no contest to felony charges arising from the incident that he had with a driver of a moving truck earlier this year. You get suspended. That's the way it used to be. That all changed with Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, Adrian Peterson, where they felt like they had to do something more than sit back and wait for what the justice system does. Because if you remember the Ray Rice thing from 6 years ago, he got a diversion program or probation or something that didn't really match what he should have gotten, and that's when the NFL felt like, well, we need to make our own decisions. We can't trust the justice system anymore. In a weird sort of way, they've come full circle.
They have.
And now they're back to trusting the justice system for the final word on this Antonio Brown case.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing that jumped out to me, Mike, is the fact that Antonio Brown didn't appeal the suspension either, which would make me believe that he thinks maybe this civil suit and all that could fizzle out as well. Like, hey, all right, that's good. All right, I'll pay my, my debt to society, whatever, the NFL, and just, take the 8 games and see where it goes from here. So maybe he's got a feel for that as well, and we'll see where it goes. But either way, if the NFL gives off the sense of, yes, teams are calling, and unlike last year where you said they were going, we'll probably put them on the NFL, the commissioner exempt list. If they're getting the sense this year that that's not going to be the case, you're going to have a handful of teams call for Antonio Brown. There's no doubt about it. Even though he hasn't played football in a year or whatever else, he still is not far enough removed from his prime or being one of the best receivers in football to where I would think a handful of teams, want his services.
Coming up next hour, we're going to have a draft of the teams that we think should sign Antonio Brown. And I now believe, assuming he can get through August, September, October with no further incidents, and some may say that that's not a justified assumption. Assuming he can stay out of trouble over the next 3 months, I think he'll be back. We'll draft the teams that we think should sign him.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.